What happens when two of Hollywood's most respected legends clash on live television in a debate so intense that security had to get involved? It only took 33 seconds for decades of mutual respect to completely shatter on national TV. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the moments celebrities want buried, and the confrontations that change everything. You won't want to miss what happens next. Last night on The View, what started as a celebration of an iconic career turned into one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. Denzel Washington, the two-time Academy Award winner known for his dignity and professionalism, walked onto that set expecting a friendly conversation with people he'd known for years. Instead, he walked into what would become the most uncomfortable hour of television anyone had seen in years, a confrontation so intense that it would dominate headlines and social media for days to come. The studio audience was packed to capacity, buzzing with excitement about seeing one of cinema's greatest actors in person. People had lined up hours before the show started, hoping to get a glimpse of the legendary performer. The energy was electric as Denzel made his entrance, waving to the crowd with that signature calm confidence he's known for, that presence that fills a room without effort. The co-hosts greeted him warmly, standing up from the table to give him hugs and handshakes, all smiles and excitement. For the first several minutes, everything seemed perfectly fine. They discussed his latest film project, a passion project he'd been trying to get made for years, that was finally coming to fruition. Denzel spoke eloquently about the story, about why it mattered to him personally, about the responsibility of telling important stories. They talked about his incredible career spanning 4 decades, from his early days on stage to becoming one of Hollywood's most bankable and respected stars. The conversation flowed naturally. They laughed about stories from various movie sets, about working with different directors, about the evolution of filmmaking over the years. Denzel was charming, funny, engaging in all the ways that had made him a favorite guest on talk shows throughout his career. The audience loved every minute, applauding enthusiastically, laughing at his anecdotes, completely captivated by his presence. Whoopi Goldberg sat at the table with her usual relaxed demeanor, sipping her coffee, nodding along as the other hosts asked their questions. She'd been quieter than usual during the first part of the interview, letting the others take the lead, seemingly content to just listen and observe. She and Denzel had known each other for years, had worked together on projects, had attended the same industry events, had always shown mutual respect in public. They'd praised each other's work in interviews, supported each other's causes, seemed to genuinely appreciate one another's contributions to the industry. The audience loved seeing two legends sharing the same space. Two icons who had both broken barriers and changed the industry in fundamental ways. Both had won Oscars. Both had commanded respect across multiple decades. Both had used their platforms to speak out on important issues. There was a sense of history in the room, of witnessing something special. The conversation flowed naturally through topics both light and serious. Denzel spoke about his approach to choosing roles, about why he turned down certain parts and said yes to others, about the criteria he used to evaluate scripts. He talked about working with young actors, about his passion for mentoring the next generation, about the importance of passing down knowledge and experience. He discussed staying relevant in an industry that constantly changes, that always seems to be looking for the next big thing, while maintaining his own artistic integrity and standards. The other hosts were clearly thrilled to have him there, asking thoughtful questions and hanging on his every word. They brought up his theater background, his training, his discipline. They asked about balancing his film career with his family life. They wanted to know about his process, his preparation, what drove him to keep working at the highest level after all these years. Denzel answered everything with grace and intelligence, making each response feel personal and genuine rather than rehearsed. The audience applauded at all the right moments, laughed when appropriate, and seemed completely engaged. This was The View at its best, a substantive conversation with someone worth listening to, someone with actual wisdom and experience to share. Then the conversation shifted to current events in Hollywood, to the state of the industry, to the ongoing discussions about diversity and representation. One of the co-hosts brought up recent discussions about representation in the industry, about the progress that had been made over the decades, and the work that still needed to be done. It seemed like a natural extension of what they'd been talking about, a way to get Denzel's perspective on the bigger picture given his long career and unique vantage point. Denzel spoke thoughtfully about his experiences, leaning forward slightly, his hands gesturing to emphasize points. He talked about the doors that had been closed to him early in his career, about being told certain roles weren't for actors who looked like him, about having to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. He discussed the opportunities he'd worked hard to create for others, the young actors he'd mentored, the projects he'd helped get greenlit that featured diverse casts and told different kinds of stories. His voice carried weight, authority born from lived experience. He was measured in his words, careful not to sound bitter despite discussing real obstacles he'd faced. He acknowledged the progress that had been made, the doors that had opened, the success stories of younger actors who'd benefited from the path people like him had helped pave. But he also noted that there was still work to be done, still barriers to break down, still stories that needed to be told. The audience listened intently. This was the kind of conversation The View was supposed to facilitate. Substantive discussions about important topics with people who had genuine insight to offer. The other hosts were nodding along, asking follow-up questions, clearly interested in what Denzel had to say. That's when Whoopi decided to chime in. You know, Denzel, she said, leaning forward slightly, I've been hearing you make some comments lately about how the younger generation doesn't appreciate the struggles we went through. Do you really think that's fair to say? The energy in the studio shifted immediately. It wasn't a hostile question on the surface, but there was something in Whoopi's tone that everyone picked up on. Something challenging. Something that suggested this wasn't going to be a simple back and forth where everyone agreed and moved on. The other hosts glanced at each other, eyebrows raised slightly, sensing that the dynamic had just changed. Denzel's expression changed subtly. His smile remained, but his eyes grew more focused, more alert. You could see him processing the question, recognizing that this wasn't just idle curiosity. I don't think I said they don't appreciate it, Whoopi. I said some of them don't understand it. There's a difference. A big difference. Appreciation and understanding are two very different things. But isn't that a bit condescending? Whoopi pressed. And now the other hosts were definitely looking uncomfortable. They were shifting in their seats, probably wondering whether to intervene or let this play out. To assume they don't understand just because they're younger? We were young once too. People said the same things about us, remember? That we didn't get it. That we hadn't paid our dues. No, they didn't, Denzel replied, his voice still calm but with an edge creeping in, a hardness that hadn't been there before. What people said about us was that we weren't good enough, that we didn't deserve to be there, that we didn't belong, that we should be grateful for whatever scraps we got thrown. That's not what I'm saying about anyone. I'm saying there's value in understanding history, in knowing what came before. The audience had gone noticeably quieter, sensing that this wasn't the friendly conversation they'd been enjoying just moments ago. The cameras caught everything, zooming in on faces, capturing the tension that was building with each exchange. You could see audience members leaning forward, eyes wide, suddenly paying much closer attention. Whoopi shook her head slowly, a slight smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes, that looked more like frustration than amusement. I think you're splitting hairs, Denzel. When you say they don't understand the struggle, when you use that language, you're implying they're somehow less than, that they haven't earned their place the way we did, that their struggles aren't as valid as ours were. That's not what I'm saying at all. Denzel's voice rose slightly, just enough to be noticeable, just enough that everyone in the studio felt it. And I think you know, That's not what I'm saying, Whoopi. I'm talking about historical context, about understanding where we came from so we know where we're going, about learning from the past. That's not condescending, that's necessary. That's how progress works. One of the other hosts tried to jump in, probably hoping to diffuse the situation before it escalated further, trying to find some middle ground. I think what Denzel is saying is, but Whoopi kept going, not ready to let it drop. Her focus entirely on Denzel now. But Denzel, come on. You've been making these kinds of comments for months now. I've read the interviews. About how things were harder in your day. About how young actors have it easier now. About how they don't know what real struggle is. Don't you think that diminishes their experiences? Their challenges? The things they have to deal with that we never did? Denzel sat back in his chair, and you could see his jaw tighten. See the muscles in his neck tense. That calm, controlled exterior he's famous for maintaining, that composure that's carried him through 4 decades in a brutal industry, was starting to crack. Whoopi, I've known you for a long time. Long enough to know when someone's twisting my words, when someone's looking for an argument instead of a conversation. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. You're taking things out of context, removing nuance, and presenting them in the worst possible light. The studio went dead silent. You could hear the air conditioning, could hear someone's phone buzzing in the audience, could hear every tiny sound because nobody was making any noise. The other hosts looked genuinely shocked, their mouths slightly open, eyes darting between Denzel and Whoopi. The audience seemed to collectively hold their breath, sensing that something serious was happening, that this had moved beyond uncomfortable into potentially explosive territory. Because Denzel Washington doesn't usually show frustration publicly. He's known for being composed, thoughtful, measured in his responses, always maintaining his dignity. But something about this was getting under his skin, breaking through that carefully maintained exterior. I'm not twisting anything. Whoopi shot back, and there was steel in her voice now, her posture straightening, her expression hardening. I'm repeating what you said in multiple interviews. Your exact words. I've got the quotes right here if you want me to read them back to you. Maybe you need to think more carefully about what you say if you don't want people to interpret it this way. Maybe you need to be more precise with your language. Maybe you need to listen more carefully instead of looking for controversy. Denzel responded. And now his voice had that intensity he brings to his most powerful film roles, that commanding presence that makes you unable to look away. Maybe you need to actually hear what people are saying, instead of hearing what you want them to be saying so you can create drama. I've been very clear about what I mean. Very clear. I've explained it multiple times, in multiple ways. But you're choosing to hear what you want to hear. You're choosing to find offense where none was intended. The other co-hosts were frozen, literally sitting perfectly still, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out, probably terrified of making things worse. The audience had gone from excited to uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, watching 2 icons they admired, going head-to-head in a way nobody had anticipated, in a way that felt genuinely hostile. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real conflict, playing out in real time. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms across her chest in a defensive posture, her expression set. So now I'm the problem? I'm just asking you to clarify your statements, Denzel. That's what we do here. We ask questions. We have conversations. We challenge each other. If you can't handle that, maybe talk shows aren't for you. There's a difference between challenging and attacking, Denzel said, and his voice had dropped to that low, powerful register that commands attention, that makes people lean in to hear every word. And right now, in front of all these people, on national television, you're attacking me for having an opinion, for sharing my experience, for speaking my truth. That's not a conversation, Whoopi. That's an ambush. That's something else entirely. And you know it. Oh, come on. Whoopi laughed. But it was a harsh sound, not her usual warm chuckle. You can't handle a little pushback? You're Denzel Washington. You've faced way worse than some questions on a talk show. This isn't about handling pushback. Denzel's response was immediate, sharp. This is about respect. About not putting words in my mouth and then acting like I'm the one being unreasonable when I correct you. I came here today as a guest, as someone I thought was a friend, and instead I'm being ambushed. One of the other hosts finally found her voice. Guys, maybe we should take a breath. And no, Denzel cut her off, his eyes never leaving Whoopi's face. Let's not take a breath. Let's finish this. Because clearly Whoopi has something she wants to say to me, and she's been waiting for the cameras to be rolling to say it. Whoopi's expression hardened. You want to know what I want to say? Fine. I think you've gotten comfortable. I think success has made you forget what it was really like coming up. And now you're sitting in your mansion, looking down at everyone else, acting like some kind of authority on struggle. The gasp from the audience was audible. The other hosts looked absolutely horrified. Because those weren't just challenging questions anymore. That was a direct personal attack on someone's character, on their integrity, on everything they'd built over a legendary career. Denzel stood up slowly. The movement was deliberate, controlled, but you could see the anger radiating off him. Sitting in my mansion, looking down at everyone? Whoopi, I have worked every single day of my life for what I have. Every single day. Don't you dare sit there and act like I forgot where I came from. Then stop acting like you're better than everyone else. Whoopi's voice rose now too, matching his energy. She was standing as well, both of them on their feet across that table. Stop acting like your struggle was somehow more legitimate than what people go through now. I never said that. Denzel's voice boomed through the studio. Not once. But you know what? Maybe I should have. Because at least when I was coming up, people didn't make up lies about what you said, just to create drama for their TV show. The audience was in complete shock. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were looking around as if trying to figure out if this was real or some kind of planned bit. But the raw emotion on both faces made it clear this was very, very real. Lies? Whoopi's laugh was bitter. So now I'm a liar? That's what we're doing? You come on my show, say whatever you want, and when someone calls you on it, they're a liar? Your show? Denzel's eyes flashed. Your show? That's what this is about? This is your territory, so you get to control the narrative? Get to decide what people mean when they speak? That's not what I said, that's exactly what you said. Denzel's finger pointed at her, his whole body radiating intensity. You're acting like because we're in your house, you get to tell me what I think, what I believe, what I meant by my own damn words. One of the producers could be seen in the background, frantically making signals, probably trying to get them to cut to commercial. But it was too late. This train had left the station and nobody was stopping it now. You know what your problem is, Denzel? Whoopi's voice was cold now, cutting. You can't handle being questioned. You're so used to everyone treating you like royalty that the moment someone disagrees with you, you fall apart. Fall apart? Denzel's laugh was sharp, humorless. I'm not falling apart. I'm standing up for myself. Something I learned to do a long time ago when people like you weren't there to have my back. People like me? Whoopi's eyes went wide. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means exactly what I said. When I was fighting for roles, fighting for respect, fighting to be taken seriously as an actor, and not just a token, where were you? Where was this passion for defending people then? The other hosts were trying desperately to regain control. One of them stood up, hands raised in a calming gesture. Okay, everyone. Let's just take a moment and, no. Both Denzel and Whoopi said it at the same time, their voices overlapping. Whoopi continued, You don't get to question my commitment to this industry. I've been fighting these battles longer than you have. Don't you dare come into my space and act like I haven't earned my place. Then don't question mine, Denzel shot back. Don't sit there and accuse me of forgetting my roots, of looking down on people, of being comfortable in my success like it's something to be ashamed of. I earned every bit of what I have. And I don't need to apologize for it to you or anyone else. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. The studio audience was completely silent, too shocked to even whisper to each other. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of this historic meltdown. "You know what?" Whoopi said, her voice suddenly quiet but no less intense. "Maybe you should leave. If you can't handle an honest conversation, if you're going to come on here and disrespect me and this show, maybe you should just go." Denzel stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched out, becoming unbearable. Then he nodded slowly, a bitter smile crossing his face. "You're kicking me off your show," he said, and it wasn't a question. "You invited me here, you attacked me, and now you're kicking me off." "I'm giving you an out," Whoopi replied, "before this gets worse." "Worse?" Denzel's voice rose again. "How could it get worse? You've already accused me of being an elitist, of forgetting where I came from, of lying about my own words. What's left?" "The choice is yours," Whoopi said, arms crossed. "Stay and keep arguing, or leave with whatever dignity you have left." The other hosts tried one more time to salvage things. "Denzel, Whoopi, please, we're all friends here. Let's just sit down and talk this through like adults." But Denzel was already removing his microphone. His hands were steady despite the obvious anger coursing through him. "No, we're not all friends. I thought we were, but clearly I was wrong. You don't treat friends like this. You don't ambush them, twist their words, and then act like they're the problem when they defend themselves." "Nobody ambushed you," Whoopi insisted. "I asked you legitimate questions based on things you said publicly. If you can't handle that, that's on you, not me." Denzel placed the microphone carefully on the table, the movement controlled despite the emotion radiating from every part of his body. His hands were steady even as his voice shook slightly with suppressed anger. "You know what the saddest part about all this is? I respected you. I've always respected you. I've defended you when other people criticized you. I've praised your work. I've considered you not just a colleague, but someone I genuinely cared about. But this," he gestured at the table, at the studio, at everything that had just happened, his hand sweeping through the air. "This is beneath you, Whoopi. Way beneath you. This is petty. This is mean-spirited. This isn't worthy of who you are or who I thought you were. Don't lecture me about what's beneath me." Whoopi's voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. "You don't have that right. You don't get to come on my show, insult me, and then act like you're taking the high road. That's not how this works." "I have every right," Denzel replied, his voice steady now, controlled again, that famous composure returning, but charged with something harder underneath. "I have the right to call out someone I considered a friend when they betray that friendship for ratings, for a moment, for whatever this is." That's exactly what this was. A setup, a calculated move, a chance to create a viral moment at my expense, to use our history, our friendship, everything we've shared over the years, to generate controversy and attention. Whoopi shook her head vigorously, her hands coming up in frustration. "If that's what you think, then you really have lost touch. Not everything is about you, Denzel. Not everything is some conspiracy or setup. Sometimes people just disagree with you. Sometimes you're actually wrong. Sometimes your perspective isn't the only valid one. Maybe that's what you can't handle. And sometimes," Denzel said quietly, his voice dropping so low that everyone in the studio had to strain to hear him, which made it even more powerful, "people you thought you knew show you who they really are." Thank you for that lesson, Whoopi. It was expensive, it hurt, but it was worth it. Because now I know. Now I see clearly, and I won't make the mistake of trusting you again. He turned to leave, his movements deliberate, dignified, refusing to be rushed or to show weakness even in this moment of obvious pain and anger. And that's when Whoopi called after him, her voice carrying across the studio. "That's right. Walk away. That's what you do, right? When things get tough, when someone challenges you, When you can't control the narrative, just walk away. Real brave, Denzel. Real mature. Denzel stopped. For a moment, it looked like he might turn back around, might re-engage. The entire studio held its breath, waiting to see what would happen. But then he shook his head, just slightly, and continued walking toward the exit. Real mature, Denzel. Whoopi's voice followed him. Real professional. But Denzel didn't respond. He didn't turn around. He didn't give her the satisfaction of another reaction. He just walked through that studio door, his back straight, his head high, and let it close behind him with a definitive sound that echoed through the shocked silence. The camera stayed on Whoopi for a moment, catching the mix of emotions on her face. Anger, certainly, but also something else. Maybe regret. Maybe realization of how far things had gone. Maybe just shock at what had transpired. The other co-hosts sat frozen, looking at each other with wide eyes, clearly trying to figure out what to do next. The audience remained silent, processing what they'd just witnessed. Nobody clapped, nobody cheered, nobody seemed to know how to react to seeing two legends they admired tear into each other like that. And that door Denzel had walked through stayed firmly closed. There would be no coming back. No apology, no reconciliation for the cameras, just the aftermath of a confrontation that nobody had seen coming, and nobody would forget anytime soon.